So you recently, well, I guess, is it last year or 2 years ago? Maybe 2 years ago, bought the Bermuda Stock Exchange. When was that?
Yep.
That was 2000 and
The initial investment was actually before my time. It was in, I think, 2019. It might have been 18. But we actually completed 100% of the acquisition at the end of last year. So Miax now owns 100% of the Bermuda Stock Exchange. So yeah, that just took place, or was finalized rather, at the end of last year.
so the Bermuda Stock Exchange hasn't necessarily been the hub of activity prior to that time,
Right.
but basically you bought the existing stock exchange on the island, and anybody who is familiar with Bermuda knows that they have been certainly a leader from a regulatory perspective with regards to digital assets. They've implemented a number of statutes, some of which have been, actually lifted into Wyoming. When Wyoming was drafting their legislation, they drew heavily on Bermuda's legislature, what they've done around digital asset businesses, the licensing
Mm-hmm.
and what have you. And so it's a very receptive island. It's also their tradition of insurance obviously makes them, they're seen as sort of a more, I guess, risk averse country. And that's, and obviously they're close to the US, which is also cool. And they've got nice beaches too. So anyway, but that doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
But do you want to talk a little bit about what your experience has been with Bermuda so far, and how do you actually, what do you intend to do with the Bermuda Stock Exchange?
Yeah. Well, Eric, I think we need to point out the obvious, which is that I mentioned that the final chunk of those shares in BSX were acquired at the end of last year. So we had essentially a controlling interest, but not the whole interest in BSX before the end of last year. And so there's a lot of transactional activity related to that, as you might guess. And the other thing I was going to say is that last year's a very odd year because of the pandemic. And so obviously the world continued to turn, the industry continued to move forward, capital markets industry more broadly, but even the crypto asset industry obviously has seen some growth and things have moved on. But it obviously has been a little bit of a hindrance in terms of trying to get down to Bermuda. You could still do Zoom meetings and everything else, but there has been progress behind the scenes, mainly on the transactional side, as I described. But we definitely are very excited about the DABA regime. That's one of the main reasons. Again, it wasn't my decision; it was made before I joined. But Tom, our CEO, one of the main reasons he was really intrigued by the BSX was the development of the DABA framework, and so it just provides, the simplest way to look at it is it provides a lot more product flexibility than other jurisdictions do, but with the imprimatur and the oversight of a very credible regulator. I don't have to tell you, the Bermuda Monetary Authority, it's part of a whole assortment of different regulatory colleges on the global level. It's a member of IOSCO. It has various agreements with market regulators in the United States, cooperative agreements with respect to enforcement. So it's viewed as a very mature, credible regulator, which sets it apart from some of the other jurisdictions where you have incredible flexibility on the product front, but maybe not the same level of scrutiny by the local market regulator than what you see in Bermuda. And so those things make Bermuda very attractive and interesting as a jurisdiction. And then you add the fact that it's very, very close to the US, right? So it's one time zone away. It's very easy and practical to deal with people in Bermuda for that reason as well. So it's an exciting jurisdiction. There are some challenges to it in the sense that it still is an island, and the way the securities market has been set up there historically, it's very focused and driven by an exchange member type of market structure. And so one of the things that we haven't experienced it ourselves, but just looking at some decisions made by the BMA with respect to other applicants for a DABA license down there, I think they're being pretty flexible about market structure. And obviously that's important when you're talking about digital assets, where the idea that somehow or another you need to be brokered onto an exchange in Bermuda by some, Bermuda domiciled and Bermuda located exchange member is a model that doesn't really make sense for this asset class. And kudos to the BMA, because I think they've recognized that. And as I said, they've shown some flexibility in terms of allowing that market structure around securities with this new technology to evolve in a positive way. And I think ultimately that's going to solve for some of the challenges that you would normally see. And we've seen it in other jurisdictions, again, where they're island nations or what have you. But unlike some of those other jurisdictions, again, in the case of Bermuda, you have a pretty mature and serious regulator.
Yeah, and I even wrote an article about, like, in sort of in terms of jurisdictions that have prescriptive regulation that's actually helpful, like, meaning, hey, I'm trying to start a marketplace. I want to determine, what do I need for security? What do I need for custody? What do I need for, how do I handle AML? How do I handle market manipulation? What are the code of conduct? Bermuda's, like, it's amazing what they've done. And I look at what they've done, and it's like, if you're thinking about doing a marketplace, you should be pulling from that statute, not because you have to, but because there are some really helpful guidelines for
Yeah.
structuring a marketplace. It's I actually did a survey of a multitude of jurisdictions. Bermuda by far, Singapore is up there too, particularly with some of their newer stuff. But as of a couple of years ago, I have to say Bermuda's got they've done a great job, and they continue to do so.
Yeah, I agree.
So